Hi everyone, I'm Andrea Fallencore with Aspire Performance Coaching, where I use sports psychology to help both athletes and coaches gain a mental edge. I'm a resource for those who may be struggling with performance issues, as well as those who want to gain a leg up on their competition and increase their mental toughness. So today I'm going to be focusing really on exploring the relationship between anxiety, pressure, and performance. Really specifically looking at how anxiety and pressure really impact and influence performance. And I think this is best described visually. So let me go ahead and switch on over. So I know there's a lot going on your screen right now, but let's really break this down. So this axis right here is your arousal, ranging from very low. You can think of this as sleeping or not being really motivated or aroused, not having a whole lot of energy, all the way over to here to high. So being really anxious or feeling a lot of pressure. And this vertical axis is performance, again, ranging from low, very poor performance to high, your best performance ever. So as you can see, the connection between performance and arousal or anxiety is what I like to call an inverted U. So over here, if somebody's not very aroused, typically they're not going to have a very good performance. They're going to experience a lot of boredom or maybe not feeling very motivated or challenged, and maybe even under-challenged. Over here on this far right side, when you experience a lot of arousal or anxiety, a lot of times what occurs are fear, panic, and choking. In some sports, this is called, having the yips. Okay? I like to think of this as the red zone, an area where we absolutely want to try to stay out of. And right here in the middle, kind of a middle level of arousal is where peak performance occurs and where it's our really optimal zone of arousal or optimal zone of feeling that pressure or anxiety. So a couple of examples to help you understand this graphic. Some people out there are procrastinators. They need an impending deadline in order to get themselves motivated to go out there and to perform or write a paper or study for a test. So they need that kind of day before a test or a paper is due in order to send them up this inverted U, in order to get themselves motivated and challenged so that they'll actually go out there and study. In contrast, there's others of us like myself who are absolute planners. So probably a week before we start kind of going up this arousal and kind of starting to study for the paper or study for the test or write that paper. Okay, in sports, there's this idea that there are gamers out there, those people who may not perform very well in practice, but in games, they are, definitely going out there and performing really well. So this can explain that as well. So in practice, a lot of times they're, kind of in this low arousal setting. But when the lights go on, when they know there's a competition, their arousal absolutely increases, and then they have their peak performance. So that's just another example. So let me share a little bit of my own experience when I was playing. Sometimes if there were teams that I viewed as teams that we should go out there and beat, a lot of times those games were a lot closer than I really would have liked, or maybe we even lost to those teams. So again, this can explain that. For those teams who we kind of went out there who we know that we should beat, a lot of times we weren't very aroused. We didn't feel very challenged. We didn't feel very motivated to go out there and perform well. So a lot of times we were kind of over here on this far left side of this chart. And again, those games ended up, we either didn't win by as big of a margin as we probably should have, or we may have actually lost to that team because we didn't have enough arousal. We didn't experience enough of that anxiety and pressure. Whereas other teams who we viewed as a challenge, a lot of times that's when we had our best performance. We, had a nice level of arousal. We've experienced that pressure and anxiety, and that helped us perform well. So I think a lot of people view anxiety as a negative thing and something that's very harmful to their experience. Sometimes when some people experience those butterflies, they think, oh, great, here I go again, and they believe that they aren't going to be able to perform well. A lot of times this creates a snowball effect where people are actually anxious about their anxiety, and it becomes something much greater than it would have otherwise. Well, let me show you one way that you can use this image if you're experiencing some of that pressure and you find yourself falling kind of on this right side of this image. So basketball was my primary sport, and I dealt a lot with nerves. I found this would be a real problem in what we called our pre-warm-up, the time before the organized warm-up occurred, 20 minutes before the game. So I had a really strict routine that I followed of ball handling and shooting. And I found that typically the longer that I warmed up, the more anxious that I became. I would worry that not enough of my shots were going in and that my shooting percentage wasn't good enough, which would cause me to miss more shots. I would be kind of going down into this red area. But I had thoughts that I was going to have a terrible shooting game, which again would further increase my poor performance. So I was way over here in this chart during this pre warm-up time. So once I realized what was happening, I knew that I needed to shift my arousal back over so that I would have my peak performance. And so I actually ended up cutting down on my routine, which cut down on my anxiety level, which again shifted me back over to this more optimal zone of performance. So this image should help show you that anxiety isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's actually really helpful to our performance. You need to experience a certain amount of anxiety or feel a certain amount of pressure in order for you to go out there and to perform well. So this optimal zone is something that's really different for everyone. So if you're interested in learning how this applies to you, I would invite you to go ahead and go to my website, aspireperformancecoaching.com/blog, where you're at. You can see a video recap. You can download this video recap, this nice image that kind of shows you exactly what I've been talking about in this video. So you can also find a downloadable handout of an exercise that you or potentially your athletes can go through to help them identify their optimal arousal zone. I help them identify when they're performing their best and when their arousal may not be enough and develop signs for those, as well as when their arousal may be too great and that's having a detrimental impact on their performance. So this is Andrea Fallon Korb from Aspire Performance Coaching. If you train your mind, your body will follow.